Hi, today I'm here with Olga V. Mack, CEO and Chairwoman at Parley Pro, a secure cloud-based platform for modern contract negotiation and management. She's also co-founded Son Law, an organization dedicated to preparing women in-house attorneys to become general counsels and legal leaders. Olga is also serving as an advisory board director at Philo's Channel Meter, Lovely Loot. She's also the host of Notes to My Legal Self podcast.
It's great to be here, Kison.
Hey, thanks for being here. Can we kick things off with a little bit about your story? What's Parley Pro, or how did it start?
I joined Parley Pro about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. I am what you would describe as a lateral CEO. I'm not the founder CEO. I was recruited by the founders and the investors to take the company after the product has been built, to take the product to market. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. It's been a pleasure to take this contract lifecycle management platform that is very collaborative, easy to use, highly digital, and really gives you quite a lot of insights during negotiation and has pioneered digital negotiation technology. We've grown quite a lot in the last 2 years. Most folks in the legal industry have now heard of us, and we are very excited to serve many customers. Most of them are very large companies.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your story. I looked at your background and I was thinking to myself, what has Olga not done? You've went through so many different areas and career path. But I'd love to just hear a little bit about from your side.
Well, sometimes easier to say what I have not done. I have not climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I have not jumped from airplanes. And there are a few other things that I have not done. Today, I'm building the future of law. In the past, I have been what you would describe as a tech lawyer by design. I immigrated to United States when I was 12, and I noticed, and we immigrated to California, Silicon Valley. Technology has transformed my life, my family life, my community. I saw the impact of technology and I wanted to be part of it. I didn't necessarily want to be a coder. And I saw how justice principles are lagging behind. So I went to law school, interested to be a tech lawyer, and I spent about 15-year career, some in big law, some in Fortune 500 companies, but majority of it in cutting edge pre-IPO tech startups, trying to take them public, trying to sell them, help them with regulatory adventures. And I also have a huge passion for legal tech. And for the last over 10 years, have had numerous columns, podcasts, books, helping the legal community, specifically in-house legal, the Office of General Counsel, to really embrace digital transformation and find joy in automation and ways to enjoy their legal practice.
It's so interesting that you immigrated at the age of 12 because you weren't a little baby, you weren't a full adult. Do you remember what that was like? Was there
Oh,
big
yes,
culture
I
shock
remember.
moments for you?
Yeah, the thing about being 12 and immigrating, it wasn't my choice. My parents are very Russian, unlike American parents who will, worry about kids and the trauma they inflict. My parents, being typical Russian parents, sort of decided and the kid goes. And so was not necessarily my choice. And if it hadn't been my choice, it probably would have been different because I had a vibrant social life and many friends and, enjoying what was going to become an enjoyable teenage life and early young adult life. And I immigrated to United States, which was in fact traumatic experience because culturally it was a, culture shock
Yeah.
for many reasons. One of the major reasons is that I did not speak English. And there are very few things more traumatic than going through puberty in high school is not speaking the language. And my social life, I joke, went from 100 to 0 overnight. And I did not appreciate the choice my parents made for a long time.
But then you adapted, you got over it, and now you're still here.
Most definitely still here. I guess it only took forever to adapt because reading and writing came very easily to me. It is speaking that took a long time. I was silent through most of my high school and college, and actually a big chunk of law school. But once my voice was heard, once I decided to speak, nobody could quite make me stop.
Well, let's jump into our principles. Can you tell me what are your top 3 principles that led to your success?
I truly believe in what most people today describe as sort of authenticity. And to me, what it means is showing up as yourself. For example, I've been very conscious about the fact that I sound and my accent and that I'm perceived as foreigner. And in the profession, like where I joke that most lawyers have perfected elementary school skills of reading, writing, and arguing, having fluency in a language is paramount. You can only imagine why I was self-conscious. And so for a long time, I did not speak because I just didn't like the way I sound. And throughout the numerous years that materialized in many conversations, including I've had a few friends who actually can change your accent. I've talked to one and he does it professionally. He said, Olga, if you want, with practice, we can sort of get rid of your accent. And actually, in fact, if you want to really sound legal and trustworthy in English, we'll give you an English accent. You know, you will sound, you just came straight from England. Wouldn't that be cool? You know, believe it or not, at some point, I actually highly considered it. And I had a conversation with my dad who basically said, look, Olga, people who love you and love your ideas, they will think that your accent is interesting and exotic and beautiful and sounds wonderful. And people who don't like you, it doesn't matter how you sound. They'll find something wrong with it, whether it's an accent or anything else. It really has nothing to do with the accent itself. It has a lot to do how their relationship with you. After numerous years, I decided to keep my accent and over a long period of time, essentially found a way in many other ways to show up as myself, because I do think that showing up as yourself gives you freedom and ability to play on your unique strengths. And if you embrace them, you have a recipe of how to succeed in life.
I like that. I like authenticity, show up as yourself. Great example with overcoming an accent because, by the way, I think if anything, it makes it more intriguing and allows people.
I'm glad you like me.
Yeah, people like wonder, like, hey, where are you from? What's and it's just they're really intrigued by it. There's some biases where you may look at it and have a lot of self-doubt and these things, but they're biases because it's not always the case. Everybody has a different way of thinking about things, and what you may look at as weakness, people are looking at with a lot of curiosity and they want to learn more, and it's really interesting. So how do we take showing up as yourself, being authentic into some real practical how-tos? Like how would somebody that isn't in that frame, that they're very doubtful about themselves, develop that mind frame to be authentic?
Yeah, well, I think the first step is like in anything is to really kind of note to self that moments where you cringe. And those moments kind of arise through our daily life and we cringe and we move on and we don't really pay attention. So for example, when I started doing quite a lot of videos and podcasting on social media, my voice, even later in life, after I embraced my accent, was something that I kind of was, and it took me a while to realize that one is that I never really listened to my recording. So one of many reasons I cringe is because this was a new experience. The way I sound in my head sounds very different. Actually noticing it is sort of a very important thing, because if you just sort of cringe and move on, that's just a moment in time and it's lost. It's an opportunity lost. So noticing and noting it, and when it happens repeatedly, I think is very important. I think the second step is sort of figuring out why. In the case of a voice, is it because you haven't heard yourself? Perhaps you should hear yourself more often. And, in my case, when I've been doing many more video recordings and many more podcast recordings, after listening to myself many times, I actually like the way I sound.
Yeah.
It's a familiar voice now. It's a voice that of many recordings, and I know exactly how I sound. And the more I listen to myself, the better it sounds every time. So sometimes it's just repeated exposure to that insecurity, and embracing it really will sort of breed familiarity and common experience. And so I highly recommend sort of just actually doing more of it and really getting to the point where is that foreign and because it's unfamiliar, or you don't like it because you actually need to kind of do something about it. And I find that 9 times out of 10 is because it's unfamiliar. I guess the step number 3 is really just sort of figure out the unique strengths in that and unique point of view. And in my case, that I literally know what it's like not having a voice and the importance of it and how empowering it is. And so having gone through that experience myself, I've done quite a lot of advocacy on behalf of women executives, women on corporate boards, because I think it's a challenge. It's another voice challenge. And I know what it's like to be voiceless. And I know what it's like to have a lot to say, yet saying nothing. And so leveraging that to either, advocacy to help yourself, help others, build something of substance that will improve someone's lives, even if it is your own. I find that to be a unique way to show up as yourself and then leveraging it into something that is bigger than you.
Okay, let me make sure we have a framework here around being authentic at this point. One is going to be identifying the moments where we cringe. And this is consciously noticing and paying attention to that, whether it's the accent example or for me growing up, I had really hairy legs. So I was always like really conscious about that. Never wear shorts when I'm a kid, but now I glorify them and my kids are always making fun of it. Like, yeah, your legs are so hairy. But so we got identify the moments we cringe, really noticing, being conscious about it. And then the next is to understand why are we cringing?
Well, and embrace it and make it familiar, right? The cringe factor often goes away the more we do it.
Yeah, because then you can overcome it once you've identified that and kind of get that sense of like, wait a minute, let's really break this down. I think that like you used the voice example, which I completely agree with. I actually, when I podcast, I'm using monitor headsets. So I got the little earbuds in to hear myself talk. And you're absolutely right. When you first hear yourself, you're not used to it. So used to hearing yourself through talking through your jawbone, and it sounds completely different. But when you get used to it, you actually find it something you like. You'll fall in love with your voice, and then you'll be very comfortable talking. When you mentioned that, like, how do you take this area and turn it into a strength? It made me think of almost like identifying weaknesses that you can build into your strengths.
Yeah, you're leaning into them, right? It gives you perspective. It gives you a point of view. It gives you opportunity to really either solve this for others or to build something of value.
Totally agree. And then, yeah, then it becomes your strength now, where you're super conscious about accent and how you sound into, hey, I got a message of value to deliver and I want to get my voice out there. I want to be in front, providing insights and getting opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. That sensitivity really makes you the perfect person to bring something to the world to help others or even yourself.
Totally agree. What's another principle you have for us?
I think when we look for opportunities, we often tend to look to history. We tend to look things we've done and where successes have been. When we look for a job, we tend to look at our history and kind of do more of the same. Maybe a little more, maybe a slightly more responsibility, better title, but basically more of the same. I truly believe in being sort of hired and really just leveraging your potential, your aptitude, not sort of your historic results and achievements. So I truly believe on being hired in aptitude as opposed to achievements, for example. And I think that's one little shift in life that I actually would like to see more people make, especially women, especially people of color. You don't have to live the same life many times and just get better at it. You have a potential of other lives, and realizing that your next job does not have to be a version of the one you have today, not even close. I think once you do a few aptitude things as opposed to achievement-based things, I think it becomes addictive and it completely changes the way you look at life.
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, I would say in my case, if you look at my career, that's one of the things you mentioned, is there anything you haven't done? Usually I describe my career in that I've never done the same thing twice. And that's because I don't usually like to repeat the thing I've done before, even if I'm excellent at it, because my values are learning and impact. And that I think means that my next opportunities are in my aptitude, in my abilities to take, 1, 2, 3, 4 experiences and leverage them into something greater. And so when you do that consciously and intentionally, you end up with something like what I've done, which is never having the same job twice.
So when we talk about, essentially this principle is leverage your aptitude, right?
Yeah.
And when we define aptitude, it's our natural ability to do things. I think this kind of ties back to the prior principle where a lot of times we have self-doubt on what we can actually do or capable of. Right? I feel that when I talk to people where they, hey, when you think about career path, you should have a big, lofty, ambitious goal. And if there's some milestones to get there or even other careers to get there, I'm wondering, the person that maybe has that level of self-doubt or maybe isn't so aware about how broad or that the aptitude there, it's almost like the confidence being behind it. Like how would you overcome that? Like, do
Um,
you ever have that where you're like, hey, I don't know if I can do this?
After all, I'm a human. I think it's only human to have self doubt. Moments of self doubt are completely normal. It is when they become prolonged and frequent, they become anxiety and other things that may be a little bit more clinical. That's maybe when you need help. Again, I think noticing moments is important. Normalizing them is important. If they become to the point they actually keep you back, you may want to work on that all the way to seeking professional help, which I'm probably not the right person to give you advice on. But I think moments are helpful. As I said, noticing them as a first step and looking back in life and finding where you had moments of doubts and you overcame them successfully and pushed forward. In most circumstances, in my case, and I think in many cases, is usually sort of a way to have a conversation with your inner critic where you can say, hey, as a matter of fact, for the last 10 years, I've had many moments of doubts. I've noticed them and I've been able to move past them and I've succeeded every time. And while there is a reason to believe that today is going to be an exception, but if history predicts the future, then probably it won't, right? If you can have a level of a conversation with yourself where you acknowledge the critic and have a logical argument based in facts, based on the past performance, I think most people can overcome that. I certainly have prolonged conversations with my critic. But I also realize that sometimes this criticism can get to the level of anxiety and may require
What
help.
drove you to overcome it? Was it, hey, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to prove the family. I'm going to prove these doubters. Like what ultimately became that driver for you to push yourself on your your capabilities?
I think ultimately I'm one of those people who views the word no as a gift. I don't like the way it sounds, and it drives me to prove you wrong. My dad knew me better than anyone, and his entire life he never said no. He would say a flavor of no, but he would never say no because he knew his daughter very well, and he knew that if he would tell me no, I would just do the opposite. And so it took me a little while to see what he saw, but there is a lot of, for me, fuel. And when I get the word no, when people give me an unequivocal no, I hear, Olga, it's impossible. And when I hear the word impossible, I have a natural drive to say, is it impossible or is it improbable? Because those are two different things. And we tend to equate them as one. And most of the time, when someone says no and suggests that it's impossible, I find a way to show that it's just maybe improbable. And if it's improbable, then it becomes a question of strategy. And if it's a question of strategy, then it's doable. And so I am driven to that challenge. I embrace it and I run with it. And I really love just kind of the process of taking from impossible to improbable to doable. It's sort of my favorite thing in the world, to take a challenge and take it through the stages of impossible, improbable, doable, and run with it.
I like that. I wanted to get to that. So if we move past the whole mindset, self-doubt, and we get to this level, we're ambitious, we're driven by our limitless potential. How do you take that and then actually turn it into fruition? How do you actually go out and find those opportunities that allow you to get to where you are today?
Well, I think it depends. It starts with who you are and again, showing up as yourself. We all have natural inclinations. And again, noticing them is very helpful. I knew that I'm drawn to innovation and technology. I knew it from the time I was 12. I just couldn't get over the fact of how much impact it had on me personally, on my family and my community. I saw both the pluses and minuses, and I really wanted to be part of that and kind of be in the middle of that. But I also knew that, I spent, for a lawyer, I have more math and science than most lawyers I know. I also knew quite well that coding was not my thing. I can probably code more than an average lawyer. And I can tell you that sitting in front of a computer and coding all day is just not my cup of tea. And so I was looking for a way to be in technology and not code, and still be on the cutting edge of technology and innovation and push the needle forward. At any one given point, I could have said, you can't be a technologist if you're not coding. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that I have a passion and interest. I don't necessarily want to develop certain skills, but I have interest in other skills. How do I find that intersection? And for me, that intersection of sort of digital transformation in law, business and technology. I've really made that intersection my home. I know all the sort of nooks and crannies of that intersection. I've been in SaaS before it was cool. I've been in data before it was cool. I've been in AI before it was cool. I've been in blockchain and crypto before it was cool. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. There are very few things in law that I haven't done. I've tried to take companies public. I've sold companies. I've testified at numerous regulators. I've done all kinds of things in law, and same in business. And I thoroughly explored that intersection of those three disciplines. And so I stayed in technology without coding and made a career out of my interest.
Your passion drives your path, but then how do you get to the part where you actually like get in those opportunities? Is it networking? Is it knocking on a bunch of doors? Is like what actually got you in? You follow the passion in terms of here's my interest and this is guiding me to the direction, but then really like getting the opportunities to get in the door.
Yeah, the framework I usually follow is sort of listen, contribute, lead. And the easiest way to do it is on social media today. But there are other ways to do it. First, you sort of observe the perceived leaders in the marketplace, what they do, what they talk about. You read a lot about it, you educate, and then that's sort of step number one. Step number two is you reach out, you contribute, you are part of the conversation. And all in the meantime, you continue learning. You really are building on a step number one. And in the end, you have a cumulative sort of knowledge and experience and network through step one and two that you can actually are in a position to lead on a specific issue within that genre. And so you start doing what's now described as thought leadership, which could be books, articles, keynote speaking, all kinds of ways to really make it known. And so in the past, my passion for the sort of future of law has been essentially through observing, contributing, and leading various conversations. And I think that's the quickest way to learn. It's the quickest way to network, and it's the quickest way to lead.
Great examples. I think that leads us to your third principle.
You really truly hope that I spill all my secrets, which I'm happy to do. A very old-fashioned in that I think reputation matters. And I think it matters even more in the age of internet where nothing ever dies truly. You can uncover my picture from undergraduate when I was doing research in India and Europe on textile trades. So today, I think it's always been the case, but now that you also have the recorded history of internet, nothing really ever dies. And people remember how you make them feel, and any one adventure may be kind of short term, but your career is long. And what you do during career will change many times. And what I find is that people who tangentially were kind of circulating, maybe not even really part of my life, that keep coming going, and they become sort of even more important or less important over time, and that changes. There is a term for that in social media of personal branding, I think that's sort of to signify the importance of reputation. I am to some extent very old-fashioned in that I actually just sort of believe in your reputation. People never forget the way you make them feel. What you do stays pretty much on internet forever. And in the long term, being a person who supports others and contributes to various communities and is a good sort of digital citizen, has a very long-term positive aura effect. And I really encourage everyone to manage, themselves, their behavior, their presence, their appearance, how they conduct themselves on a daily basis with that long-term view and permanence of the record in mind.
How do you think about that? Is it, hey, do I need to have a strategy behind this? Should I be kind of thinking as a third person and sort of look at myself from a different lens? Like, what would be the approach to be more conscious and thoughtful about the way you develop reputation as a long-term approach?
I don't know what is the best way. I know the way I do it. That may not be the best way. That just may be a way, right? If you ask me how to get to SFO, well, there are many ways. You can take an Uber, you can take BART, you can take a bicycle, you can crawl. There are many ways. I don't know which one is the better way. Probably
that's what BossMove is all about. We learn a little bit from a lot of people, and then you figure out your own way of doing it.
Yeah, I tend to think that, I like learning. And in every interaction, I like to learn something. And I also like being of help in one shape or form as well. And that's how I approach, whether they're, anything from my prospective customer to fundraising, to peers, to community, what can I learn and what can I give? And I think every interaction I have, whether it's in social media, whether it's in person, whether it is through a call, Zoom, whatever, exchange on a post, I have multiple conversations happening. The two questions I keep asking myself, what have I learned and what have I given? And I think an interaction is successful when those two things happen. It means there has been an exchange of value to both parties. And that means that they both have a warm feeling in the end. And the collection of those warm feelings, you can have a few failed interactions here and there. They will not ruin your reputation. But that collection of warm feelings, that glow, that's what ultimately adds up to a positive reputation based on my experience. Is there a better way to build it? Maybe. But I find that this one works really well for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're building your reputation around a give forward approach and essentially letting that be your mantra and drive your interactions that you have with people, which lends to the way people think about you as not a self-serving psychopath.
I certainly would not want them to think that I'm a self-serving psychopath.
but you do, you give. And I like the learning part too, because I think we forget about that. I noticed even in my early years that you would get into a meeting and you're so excited about the person you're meeting, or that, hey, this might be an opportunity to get a job or win a deal. And you're just so focused in your own head about what you're going to say and how you're trying to impress them. When you nailed it, what you should be doing is focusing on what you can actually learn from this other person, because you can learn something from anybody. And also, what value can you create? How can you help this other person? They obviously have their own goals and ambitions. What can you do to contribute to what they're trying to achieve, which ultimately drives more success for you?
Yeah, I think learning is one of the sort of underestimated values in the interaction. We tend to be focused on, is this person going to give me the next job? Is this person going to give me funding? Is this person going to be my customer? And those, of course, are very nice. I actually think what's even more valuable in building sort of long-term relationships and becoming a better version of yourself is learning. And that is to some extent much easier to get through every interaction. You get quite a lot of learning when you're open to it from people who may not have ever given you money or jobs or have become your customers, because that is something they can relatively easily give and they discard it. And you may or may not be as receptive. If you kind of are coming to those interactions with the being receptive to learning, I think you find that every interaction, at least that's what I find, have a lot of value.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Olga, what's the best mistake you've ever made?
I am a strong believer that your mistakes are sort of your opportunities. I am sure there might have been a better path. Number one thing people ask me is, how do you become a CEO? And I tell them that I'm probably not a good example, because I did not take a very direct path to that. I took a very scenic route. If they want to become the CEO, they probably should talk to somebody else. I never wanted to be one. It sort of happened to me, and when it happened, and I really enjoyed having this experience, still enjoy it very much. But do I think I've taken the most effective way to get there? No, I probably have, quote unquote, made a lot of mistakes on my way, if that was the only goal I had. I truly believe that mistakes that happen, you learn from them. They're not mistakes. They, in the end, add to your character and wisdom and really help you become a better version in whatever else you pursue. So I don't really tend to think of mistakes either negative or even as mistakes. I see them as learning opportunities that you can leverage.
Do you ever have, I mean, like, is there one example, and a lot of these are with this is kind of the closing question, and the idea is to get a fun story around, hey, I did this thing as a mistake, but it led to me starting this career that led to where I'm currently at.
The way I ended up in law, it kind of started as a mistake. In high school, remember, I didn't speak English. And there's this dumb question that every adult asks you: who do you want to be when you grow up? And they ask you this question since you show up on the planet Earth. So my parents are engineers, and when I was in Ukraine, Russia, and they would ask me, who do I want to be when I grow up, they wanted me to say a doctor or an engineer. And I wanted to see their reaction, that is kind of surprise. So I would tell them, I want to be an artist. So until I immigrated to the United States, I would tell everyone that I was going to be an artist. And I kind of went on the path of actually all of a sudden learning art for about 7 years. So that's why I know how to draw and paint really well. When we immigrated to United States and people would ask me, what do I want to be when I grow up? Saying an artist was actually kind of less controversial. So I started saying, I want to be a lawyer. And remember, I did not speak English. And so when a girl who doesn't speak English tells you that she wants to be a lawyer, people have a reaction. You know, adults kind of look at you. They don't want to be the ones who tell you that really you do. And then they have this big surprise. So I was going around telling the world that I was going to become a lawyer because I wanted to see their reaction. But be careful what you tell the world. You'll become that.
You put a stake in the ground.
Right? You put a stake in the ground. So that could be seen as a mistake. You know, there might have been other ways for me to have an impact in the world. But what a beautiful mistake it is. It really allowed me to be where I am today.
You want to get a reaction at people, and you found your career path. Awesome, Olga. Hey, I enjoyed this conversation and really enjoyed hearing about your principles to drive success. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, Kison, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you as well.
Hey, so those of the listening want to keep up with you and follow you. What are the best channels and ways to do that?
I am most active on LinkedIn. I show up in other social media too, but I'm less active there. LinkedIn is where I show up every day. I thoroughly enjoy LinkedIn community for a long time, since college actually. I've been an early adopter, and I've been very excited to see how it became much more lively during the pandemic and how many professionals have allowed themselves to show up as themselves and have conversations there. LinkedIn is really the place to find me.
Thanks again, Olga.